Good afternoon, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. This is Rich again, back for your second video blog of the day for Sunday, April 5th, 2015, around 3:45 p.m. in Belleville, Massachusetts. Had a little bit of a nice sunny day out, but breezy and cool, highs in the mid-40s, and it's cloudy up a little bit. Hope everybody had a nice Easter Sunday. Some news to report. Kentucky's men's basketball coach John Calipari has been voted into the Pro Basketball Hall of Fame. Congratulations to him. Also, Avery Johnson has been tapped to become the next men's basketball coach of the Alabama Crimson Tide. And Major League Baseball is going to announce that the 2018 All-Star Game will be played at National Park in Washington, D.C. And that's about it on the news. My next video blog subject is about the continuation of professional regional territories, which was back in the day. I'm going to be talking about the American Wrestling Association, also known as the AWA. The AWA was based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and it was a professional wrestling promotion run by Verne Gagne and Wally Carbo. It was around 30 years, from 1960 to 1990. It was probably one of the best regional promotions in all of the United States because it ran cards from many Midwestern and even Western cities like Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Chicago, Indianapolis, Denver, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada, Salt Lake City, Utah, Phoenix, Arizona, and San Francisco, California. The beginnings of the AWA happened in 1960 when Verne Gagne was in line to get an NWA world title shot against Pat O'Connell in Minneapolis, Minnesota, but Pat O'Connell did not really show up, and it got Verne Gagne and Wally Carbo, who was a promoter of the NWA in Minneapolis, so mad, and Verne Gagne had enough money, so he started his own wrestling promotion in Minneapolis, Minnesota, called the AWA, and Wally Carbo was his promoter, and he kind of owned the company along with a couple of other people, and Verne Gagne put the world championship on himself. Verne Gagne was the AWA champion for at least 8-9 times. And the AWA had it was basically a lot of wrestlers who wrestled for the AWA had solid backgrounds in amateur wrestling and stuff like that. It wasn't a gimmick-based territory and stuff. And some of the wrestlers on the roster for the AWA over in the 60s and 70s is a who's who of wrestlers. They had Billy Robinson and Gene Kiniski and Larry the Axe Henning and Harley Race. They had Fritz von Erich, the Destroyer, Dr. Mike Miller. They had Ray the Clipper Stevens, Nick Bockwinkel, the High Flyers, Greg Gagne, and Jumping Jim Brunzell. They had Pat Patterson, and they also had the American Dream Dusty Rhodes and Dick Murdoch team as the Texas Outlaws. They came through the AWA territory. They had Dick the Bruiser and the Crusher. AWA had a working relationship with Dick the Bruiser's WWA out of Indianapolis, Indiana, and they also had a couple of other working relationships with Southwest Championship Wrestling and the CWA out of Memphis. And Bobby the Brain Heenan got his start in the AWA as a manager, and he managed the Heenan family, which consisted of Nick Bockwinkel, Ray Stevens, Blackjack Lanza, and Bobby Duncombe, and Ken Patera, among others. And also, they had Lord Alfred Hayes as a manager, and Sergeant Slaughter wrestled for the AWA back in the 70s under the mask, under the name Super Destroyer Mark II. And the AWA was running big shows in Minneapolis at the St. Paul Civic Center. That's where the major house show was. And also they taped the program on Channel 9 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which is the Fox 9 affiliate in Minneapolis, St. Paul now. It was called All Star Wrestling. It was taped at at the studios of Channel 9, calling the action for many years, was Roger Kent. He was famous for saying, "Holy smoke." He was the main AWA announcer for close to 20 years. Later on, the announcers were Rod Trongard and Lee Mastro and Ralph Dragners, who got a start in like calling sports action for the AWA. He's now the Dallas Stars play-by-play announcer. And the interviewers over the years for the AWA telecast were Marty O'Neill, Mean Gene Okerlund, who got a start there, Ken Resnick, Larry Nelson, and Eric Bischoff, who became known for running WCW and being the large general manager in the WWE. So it was a who's who's of list in the AWA who was going through this. Verne Gagne had a stranglehold on the AWA World Title for many years. He lost it and won it so many times and stuff. He had so many classic feuds like against Mad Dog Vachon and Ivan Koloff and Superstar Billy Graham, who came there. Also, he had it with Fritz von Erich and others. In 1975, Verne Gagne lost the AWA World Title to Nick Bockwinkel, and Nick Bockwinkel held it for over 4.5 years. Prior to that, Verne Gagne had it for over 7.5 years. Nick Bockwinkel was a guy that Verne Gagne really trusted a lot, and Nick Bockwinkel was one of the best heel champions of all time, one of the best world champions of all time. He had a great interview style and stuff, and he also had Bobby the Brain Heenan as manager. AWA continued to go around the loop for like Minnesota, Milwaukee, and Winnipeg and Denver. They sold out pretty good in these areas and had house shows as well. During the summer months, they kind of tailed back for like house shows, but they still did the major ones during the summer, and the AWA was continuing to be one of the best regional promotions in all of the United States. They were probably the number 3 wrestling promotion for many years behind the WWF and the NWA, the major one, which was Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. And when the 80s was coming, AWA continued to take great talent. Tito Santana wrestled for them out for a while. Dino Bravo, Bob Orton Jr., and a guy by the name of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan came to the AWA in the middle of 1981. He was a heel match by luscious Johnny Valiant, but the fans cheered him, and soon he turned face and he dropped Johnny Valiant as his manager, and then Hogan got a major push for the AWA World Title against Nick Bockwinkel and stuff, who was the champion at the time. And actually, Hogan was chasing Bockwinkel throughout the AWA circuit, and it was one of the best feuds of all time in AWA history. At least 3 times Hogan was promised an AWA World Title reign, but he got mad at Verne Gagne because Verne Gagne really wanted a champion who had a good amateur background and not some kind of phony gimmick or something who was not really an amateur wrestler. He also had disputes with Hogan about merchandise and stuff, and also he wanted, as part of his contract, when he goes over to Japan and stuff like that, Hogan disputed that many times, and there were like 3 times that they had false finishes for Hogan getting the AWA World Championship. He actually won it at least a few times, but they had to reverse the decision and give it back to Bockwinkel by a technicality, by a disqualification or stop. The fans said BS. Hogan just eventually left the AWA and stuff and went to the WWE. Also, Andre the Giant appeared in the AWA a lot during the 70s and 80s, and the AWA was having a great time as a great regional promotion. But by 1984, that would change because the WWF, with Vince McMahon, was taken worldwide. They were going through all the regional territories, plunking out the best talent. So much of the talent left the AWA. Mean Gene Okerlund, Jesse the Body Ventura, Adrian Adonis, Dr. DJ Stilts, Hulk Hogan, Bobby the Brain Heenan, and so many others jumped from the AWA to WWF. And Vince McMahon offered to buy the AWA off of Verne Gagne, but Verne Gagne said no way, he's keeping it. And that's when the talent went down and stuff. But the AWA tried to go national. They had syndicated deals throughout the country on several television stations, including one in Boston on WQTV 68 for a few years. Then it went to WHLL, the All-Star Wrestling Show, which they had to start taping in like Atlantic City at the Tropicana, and also the Las Vegas, Nevada Showboat Pavilion to have like a national feel. But most of the crowds at the Tropicana Field and Tropicana Hotel and Showboat Pavilion weren't that. The crowds weren't that special, entertaining and stuff like that. And also AWA made a deal with ESPN to produce a weekly television series, which was pretty good and stuff like that. AWA had some good talent they brought back, including the Road Warriors, the Freebirds, Scott Hall, Mr. Perfect, Kurt Hennig, who was Kurt Hennig back then, and they had Larry Zbyszko, who was married to one of Greg Gagne's daughters, Catherine, and they also had the fabulous ones, Steve Kern and Stan Lane, wrestling for them. And they had Sergeant Slaughter, who came to the AWA from the WWE. They actually created a title for him. The American Championships and also the AWA World Championship at this time went from Nick Bockwinkel to Otto Wanz, who was a German wrestler. In 1982, he paid Verne Gagne $50,000 for a title reign, and Verne took it, and he dropped it a few months later back to Nick Bockwinkel. Nick Bockwinkel dropped the belt to Jumbo Tosaurus in a tour of Japan. Rick Martel won it in 1984 and had about a 19-month title reign. Rick Martel was a classic good guy. He actually had some matches with Ric Flair and Bob Backlund and Michael P.S. Hayes and a few others. And actually, the AWA was co-promoting with Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling, and World Class Championship Wrestling, with a wrestling program called Pro Wrestling USA that aired on WPIX New York and sometimes ESPN. And they had like merging the talent together. They actually produced one big super card called Super Clash 1985, which was held at Comiskey Park in Chicago, Illinois. But excuse me, they drew They drew about 25,000 fans, and they made over like $250,000. But the problem was Jim Crockett was getting a lot of the AWA talent who was on the card, like Gorgeous Jimmy Garvin and Mr. Electricity Steve Regal and a few others, to leave AWA to go to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling and vice versa. But they couldn't do any more because, the Crockett wanted a lot of AWA's talent to go over there. And AWA in like December of 1985, Stan the Lariat Hansen beat Rick Martel for the AWA World Championship in East Rutherford, New Jersey, and Stan Hansen was a champion for about 6 months. This is when AWA was going to other places to promote for cards. They had one card in the Heinz Convention Center in Boston around December of 1985, which was decent. They had it was a decent card, about 5,000. It was, I think, on Channel 5 in Boston, but they never went back to Boston again, which surprisingly they didn't. And they went to other places like New York State and like the East Coast, Baltimore and the Carolinas, but they didn't draw pretty good there. And AWA was continuing to lose talent. The Road Warriors went to Jim Crockett Promotions, Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. George's Jimmy Garvin and Steve Regal went to Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. Sergeant Slaughter actually dropped out of professional wrestling for a few years, wrestling in smaller independents. They started to get new talent like the Rockers, the Midnight Rockers, Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty. They actually promoted another super card at the Metrodome in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It was called Wrestle Rock '86, and the funny thing about it, before the card they had a Wrestle Rock rap. It was so funny. It was like Ken Resnick rapping and all, like Jerry Blackwell and Sheik Arnold Kelsey and Verne Gagne and Nick Bockwinkel. It was so funny. And they were trying to get some sports entertainment into the AWA, but it wasn't that great. The Wrestle Rock Rumble, and also they had like some great matches there. They had like the Midnight Rockers face against Buddy Rose, the Playboy, and Pretty Boy Jug Summers. They also had a 10-man women's battle royal run by Sherry Martel. They had Scott Hall and Kurt Hennig facing off against Lawn Riders, AWA World Tag Team Championship. They had a cage match with King Kong Brody, Bruiser Brody, and John Nord, who was known as Nord the Barbarian. Also, he was known in the WWE as the Berserker Husk. They faced off against Greg Gagne and Superfly Jimmy Snuka, who came to the AWA after he was fired from the WWF. And they had like special stipulation: if Gagne and Snuka won in the cage, they would face Verne Gagne, would get 5 minutes with Sheik Arnold Keishi. That was at Wrestle Rock '86. That was predictable. Gagne and Snuka won, and Verne got 5 minutes with the Sheik Arnold Keishi. That was Verne Gagne's last match in the arena. He was like 58 years old. He still had it with the sleeper hold. And the Wrestle Rock was a decent success on about 20,000, but that was the last big supercard show AWA had in an arena and in a stadium, because around 1986 or so, the AWA's talent level was going down because AWA, Verne Gagne really didn't want to change with the times. He still believed that like professional wrestlers with amateur backgrounds would succeed in the wrestling business. He didn't believe in that sports entertainment thing, but a lot of the fans weren't really buying that. AWA continued to have a few stars, like Colonel De Beers, who was like a wrestler from Portland, Oregon, by the name of Al Raskowski, who had a gimmick that he was from South Africa, who believed in apartheid and stuff like that, and he refused to wrestle minority wrestlers. And Colonel De Beers had a major feud with Superfly Jimmy Snuka, but that Snuka was basically all washed up by then. And I like the Colonel De Beers heel character, even though it was kind of a racist. It was a pretty good heel character, but with the AWA, with the talent back then, they weren't. It got over, but I'm surprised that WWE or Mid Atlantic Championship Wrestling didn't scoop up at Colonel De Beers. Maybe they weren't interested in him or something. Also, Stan Hansen was the AWA World Champion. Actually, half the time he spent over in Japan with Giant Barber's All Japan group, and he refused to do the job to Nick Bockwinkel at a house show in Denver, Colorado in June of 1986, because he was going to be touring the most of the summer of '86 with All Japan Wrestling, and Giant Bubba wanted Stan with the AWA World Championship, but Verne did not want his AWA World Championship also the summer in Japan. So Hansen left the AWA. Nick Bockwinkel, at 53 years old, became the AWA World Champion again, and he feuded with Larry Zbyszko. Bockwinkel turned face after Larry Zbyszko hit Bockwinkel with the nunchucks and stuff, and a match against Greg Gagne and stuff. And also around this time, the Midnight Rockers feuded with Buddy Rose, and Pretty Boys Doug Summers with the AWA World Tag Team Championships. This was a classic feud, probably one of the best tag team feuds of all time ever, because of like Rose and Summers as the AWA World Champions, Tag Team Championships with Sherry Martel in their corner. Sherry Martel was a great women's manager, underrated as a heel women's as a manager, in my opinion, and she was also the AWA World Women's Champion at the time, but they didn't feature women's wrestling so much. But to keep Sherry like on the talent roster, she was a one manager to Summers and Rose, and even though Playboy Buddy Rose was over 300 pounds allegedly, he performed pretty good in this feud with the Midnight Rockers and Summers, who was a journeyman wrestler. Rockers finally get their AWA World Tag Team Championship in a steel cage match in St. Paul, Minnesota. And they continued on, and also there was rumors going around that Verne Gagne really wanted to put the AWA World title on his son Greg Gagne, but many AWA promoters who were in other cities did not really like that because they thought it was a form of nepotism. Plus, a lot of these promoters says Greg Gagne didn't really have the charisma like Verne did. And a couple of times, Verne actually tried to pull the trigger on it. And this has happened like in the fall of 1987 when Kurt Hennig became AWA World Champion. He beat Nick Bockwinkel in spring of 1987 with a pair of brass knuckle quarters helped by Larry Zbyszko to turn Kurt Hennig heel. And Kurt Hennig faced off against Greg Gagne for the AWA World Championship at a Thanksgiving show in St. Paul, Minnesota. Interference by Larry the Axe Hennig and Verne Gagne. Greg Gagne won the AWA World title, but a few days later the decision was reversed on television because of interference of Verne Gagne. It was still, but people was happy that Greg Gagne didn't win the AWA World title, become a long-term champion. To my personal opinion, I think Greg Gagne should have been an AWA World Champion maybe for a brief period of time during that feud with Kurt Hennig. He could have won it, and he could have lost it at an ESPN taping back to Kurt Hennig. Also around this time, AWA got back. They had the original Midnight Express, Dennis Condrey, and Randy Rose, who quickly became AWA World Tag Team Champions with Paulie Dangerously in their corner. Also, they got Tommy Wildfire Rich, who was still a little bit hot from his time in Georgia Championship Wrestling as a part of the show. Plus, they had other wrestlers. They still had a good, decent show on ESPN, but the house show's attendance was dropping like crazy. They didn't even draw too much in their home state of Minnesota. They basically taped television at the Showboat Pavilion in Las Vegas. They stopped the Atlantic City tapings a few years prior. They still were on syndication and stuff. But by 1988, the AWA was continuing to lose talent left and right. Kurt Hennig went to the WWE, and they had other wrestlers go to WWE or Mid-Atlantic or what it became WCW, and Verne was, continuing to lose money and stuff. But he still wanted to stay. He still wanted the wrestling. He still wanted to be in the wrestling business and stuff, as an attempt to try to get back his former glory. Verne Gagne made working arrangements with the CWA, Jerry Jarrett and Jerry the King Lawler. He put Lawler as the AWA World Champion. He made a deal with World Class Championship Wrestling. He sent some talent down there, and the AWA and CWA and WCCW were going to have they were going to co-promote a pay-per-view called Super Clash 3 that was going to be held at the UIC Pavilion in Chicago, Illinois in December of 1988, with the main event, a unification match, was for the WCCW World title, which Kerry Von Erich was defending against the AWA World Championship. Like Jerry the King Lawler, this match was a hollow, about 15 minutes or so. Kerry puts the island claw on Jerry the King Lawler, but the referee calls bell. The fans and the attendants thought Kerry Von Erich was the AWA World Champion, but the referee said Kerry Von Erich was bleeding profusely, and they gave the belt to Jerry. They unified the belt with Jerry the King Lawler's, and it was a bullshit thing. Kerry should have went over as AWA, winning the AWA and WCCW World Championship, but I think maybe Verne didn't really trust Kerry Von Erich at the time because he was he had a lot of drug problems. And also when they had the pay-per-view buy rate and the attendance, it came out that the card only made $25,000. And Verne Gagne kept all the money to himself. He did not pay any of this talent, not including Jerry the King Lawler, who was his champion. Jerry the King Lawler decided to screw the AWA. He took the AWA belt with him. Storyline says Jerry the King Lawler was stripped of the AWA World title because he did miss mandatory title defenses. But the real reason was Jerry the King Lawler did not get paid for being on that pay-per-view, and he was not going to return the belt unless if he got his money. Then to this day, he did not get the money. And he still has possession of that AWA belt, which eventually that became the Unified World Championship of the USWA. After this, Super Clash 3, CWA, and WCCW ended their relationship with AWA. And then they stopped taping at the Soap Sports Pavilion in Las Vegas, Nevada, because that hotel and casino got sold to other people, and they stopped the tapings. They had to start taping back in Minnesota at the Mayo Civic Center at Rochester, Minnesota, and they had a tournament for the new AWA World Champion. It was a battle royal. It was held on ESPN. The winner of that match was the battle royal was Larry Zbyszko. The last wrestler he eliminated was Tom Zink. It was a perfect decision to put Larry Zbyszko in the AWA World Champion because he was married to Verne's daughter, and he was not going to leave the promotion and stuff. And this has started to go downhill, the AWA, in 1989. A lot of house show attendance was awful. They were losing syndicated deals left and right. They still had the ESPN deal, but ESPN preempted them a lot. They were on different times, late at night and stuff like that. But there was some good talent who came to the AWA. They had Medusa Michelli, who was the women's champion, and then Diamond Dallas Page as a manager, and they had Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond Bag Company and a couple of others like Koso, like guy who became Yokozuna. And they also had old wrestlers like Wahoo McDaniels and Manny Fernandez and Baron Von Raschke still wrestled for the AWA, but the writing really was on the wall. They got Sergeant Slaughter back and the Iron Sheik, but people weren't really interested in the AWA. The AWA had a new concept in late 1989 through 1990. It was called Team Challenge Series. They had all the wrestlers on the AWA roster at that time. They had like 3 teams. It was one captain by Larry Zbyszko, one captain by Sergeant Slaughter, and one captain by Baron Von Raschke. And every time they had these wrestlers wrestle each other, whoever won, they got points and stuff. And the winner of the most points would split a cost of $1 million for the whole team and stuff. And these matches were taped in a studio because they said for it to be distracted. But the real reason why it was taped in a studio, they couldn't get fans to come to the crowd at the AWA. And this was awful because the AWA was continuing to lose money and stuff and interest. They had a team called the Destruction Crew, who was Mike Enos and Wayne Bloom. They became AWA World Tag Team Champions. They also had a wrestler called the Trooper, who became the Patriot. And, they kept some talent, but most of their other talent was going to the WWF or WCW. They actually put Mr. Saito as AWA World Champion, a tour of Japan for a few months in 1990, but Larry Zbyszko regained the title. They tried to promote a card with WCW in the spring of 1990, have the WCW World Champion Ric Flair face off against Brian Pillman, and also have Larry Zbyszko face off against Mr. Saito in Minneapolis. But that co-promotion just was only one shot deal because WCW and AWA lost so much money on it, and there's so much big things about that. And the Team Challenge Series became really a joke. Like in the summer of 1990, they were going to put the AWA World title on Sergeant Slaughter, but Sergeant Slaughter bolted to the WWF, and then the crowds in the house show circuit was little or nothing. And in August of 1990, they had the last TV taping of AWA Championship Wrestling on ESPN. It was the finals of the Team Challenge Series. Larry Sabisco's team, called Larry's Legends, won. The match was won with a battle royal, won by longtime AWA jobber Jake the Milkman Milliken, and everybody was congratulating him and stuff like that. And they won the fictitious $1 million and stuff. And that was probably the last AWA card in existence, because in the fall of 1990, the promotion was inactive for many months. Finally, Larry Sabisco, the reigning AWA World Champion, signed a contract with WCW in December of 1990. He was immediately stripped of that title, the AWA title, and the AWA folded. And the reason why the AWA stayed along so long, because Verne Gagne had a piece of land that he owned in Minnesota. He owned a lakefront property, and he also owned a piece of land. But the state of Minnesota really wanted that piece of land so they could put a state park. But Verne Gagne continued to budge and budge. That piece of land was a collateral for him to fund the AWA for the lean year, the fading years and stuff like that. But by the early 1991, the state of Minnesota took that property Verne owned by eminent domain, and when they did that, Verne lost the funding for the AWA. He had to declare bankruptcy, and that was the end of the AWA. They briefly tried to make it back in 1991, promoting some cards at casinos in Minnesota, but that was just like maybe a local indie promotion, but it didn't work out. Verne Gagne declared bankruptcy, and the AWA was dead and buried forever, going out of business. ESPN and syndicated deals of the AWA still ran on television stations through at least the end of 1991, but it was repeats of old AWA programming. And the AWA was probably one of the best regional promotions of all time. Verne Gagne was a legend. He developed more talent than any professional wrestling organization in the world, which became superstars in other wrestling organizations. Verne developed them, but he couldn't keep them because he didn't have the money, and he also had the ideas that real wrestlers could still draw in the late 80s and stuff. But the world was changing from more professional wrestling to sports entertainment, and Verne was really behind on the times. And also, Verne should have gave Hulk Hogan the chance to become world champion, have him for a decent run. Maybe if Hogan was AWA world champion, he would not leave to the WWF and stuff like that. But Verne disagreed with Hogan a lot. Plus, Verne was behind on the times, and he just didn't want to change and stuff like that. Vince offered him to buy him out in 1984, but he refused, and they had a good deal with ESPN, but ESPN did not really promote them and stuff. And I was really surprised that ESPN did not make an offer to buy the AWA off of Verne in the late 80s and stuff. But maybe ESPN wasn't as big as they would become. Maybe Verne didn't want to, but if ESPN gave him a big offer, and kind of made the deal that you could stay on as a minority owner or have creative consulting control, I think Verne would have bet. Plus, in addition, Verne really wanted to make Greg Gagne the AWA World Champion, but the promoters balked at that idea, which, he runs the company. He should have given his son at least a decent shot at maybe a brief title run and stuff. They had to create the AWA International Television title because of that, which Greg was the holder of it for most of the run and stuff like that. And the AWA tape library is owned by WWE. They have a a DVD for the AWA that came out in 2006, which was pretty good. And that's about it on the AWA, which is it's one of the most spectacular regional organizations of all time, which died off in the 80s, which was, sad. But, those things happen. Well, I'll be back for the third and final video blog of the night, which will be about the person I profile. I'm going to profile Verne Gagne. And some stuff I haven't mentioned about Verne Gagne, which I will. Some interesting facts. Have a good day. Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Bye now.